Hi,
I'm
everyone.
just
Thank you so much. We're gonna wait for some other people to come in as well. I didn't realize that when I set this up, I guess I set it for 10, even though the thumbnail said 11. But, you know, really excited to have you. The ones who have joined, comment and really be engaged because it's gonna be really important.
it is. It's gonna be awesome. Good morning, everybody. I'm just gonna send an email out just to let people know that we are live. So minutes to allow people to come in.
Yeah, I think that's and I can kind of be a bit of a filler, while you're sending the email because, to your point, I think it's important because the system sends an email as well. And one thing I realized is the chats went away when I last time we had some issues and I cut some of the beginning. So the chat feature is really going to be important for anyone watching more in the future because we're really going to be engaging with you all. So the what you'll see in the chat, you'll actually be able to see it interactively, and that's been probably one of the best parts. Is Becky and I have some great content that we're going to go over with you, but the best part of it's going to be is we really want your engagement. So
Yes.
um,
I think you have some feedback with sound. Do you have your computer open and do you have two YouTubes open?
I I don't, but I have you that I can hear. Oh, is this better?
Yeah, there's like a 30-second feedback loop. It's weird. I wonder if it's my AirPod. Hold on.
Hey,
That's good. Now I don't hear the feedback. So I don't know if it was my AirPods or what, but I'm just going to send out an email
okay.
to my mail list and welcome everybody. We're going to talk about hidden pain today and like what we hold in our system. So if you want to introduce like our topics today, Kusal, that would
Yeah,
be awesome.
yeah. Let me jump into it. Hi, everyone. I'm Kusal Matthew of Koos Key. Thank you to come to this channel. Becky Lee, Soul Alchemy. She has been my partner in crime. This is our third live that we're doing, and it's been fantastic. So what we've done is we've gone over intuition. We've gone over kind of embracing pain, and now this one, what we're really going to be focusing on is more about um, the hidden pain and realistically, how do we deal with sometimes just those inner child wounds that we don't even know is an inner wound, and I think as we've been kind of talking about this, even for me, like there's still so much hidden. And and one of the concepts that we'll really kind of talk about besides hidden pain and inner child wounds is how to really identify it. And I think Becky had a really good I think infographic I saw, and it was, and it's something I will pull up at some point, and I'll talk about it. Oh, um, and but it talked about guilt, shame, and just all the various ways that we do feel some of those emotions. So
Yeah, it's super I'm such a visual person and I love analogies because I find we can like learn more from like that comparison from the tangible. We can talk about inner wounds till lack of better words, till the cows come home. However, unless you truly understand what is working for you, what's coming up in your own system, and like that shame, that guilt, that rage, whatever it is, like you might not even be able to, you know, bring it inside and be like, where's this coming from? We a lot of us we want to blame the outside for these feelings coming up. But when we start to take our own healing seriously and realize there's only self to change. There's nobody but self to change. And as we heal these things in ourselves, the outside circumstances begin to not come in the same way or they don't trigger us the same way.
yeah, I love that, and I think it's so important because to build off of Becky's point, for me, I didn't realize that that inner feeling that I had was really more of a sign, and I think that's where we talked about in our first live where we talked about intuition and having that feeling where you can you have this quiet but strong voice. And I think for me, my strong and quiet voice was taken like I it was just blocked. And some of these inner pains and some of these things that I was just carrying on for such a long time, what it did was those were almost like the breadcrumbs that, would have taken Hansel and Gretel back. But for me, it was actually um this the I was able to find something. I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is why am I avoiding this? Why am I so anxious?" And I was able to like start slowly peeling back the onion in a sense.
And that's so beautiful because what I find, even watching my own children deal with their stuff, it's like we have this tendency to want to hide under our blankets. It's like that monster under the bed or the monster in the closet when we're kids. And the more we close that closet door on that monster, the bigger the energy behind it gets because it becomes such a big fear. If we have a fear in childhood or a pain in childhood, and like our body wants to protect us, and it becomes such a big fear as we grow that when we actually start to, like you said, peel those layers of onions off and get to the center, the bulb of the onion, you're like, it's really not that bad.
Yeah, yeah, and Zaria Rose, thank you for your comment. And I want you to know, like for me, it was very much the same. I think, and we'll kind of get into how you feel about it, and we're just kind of just talking about the topic now. But like for you, you're saying that it kind of took away your self-esteem and your trust in your future, and that's where we talked about self-sabotage in our in embracing the fear in our previous life. Because for me, I was really self-sabotaging like a lot of my relationships and my own potential and future because I didn't believe. And I think because of that inner pain and not being able to just process it, that really um that shame is really kind of what kept that guilt in and kept that pain in. And I think that's where we really kind of want to talk about maybe our journey and what it has been like, and maybe that will help you all with with your journey.
You know what the beautiful thing is? We may feel now when we're still working through it that those things will haunt us every day. However, when you get to the point where you can take that haunting and turn it into empowerment, you find strength in that pain and you move past the pain, you can get to a point where you can use that to empower others. And you can use your stories that have been haunting you to spread love instead of more haunting. And it's such a beautiful transition because you'll see that start to happen. I realize like my healing journey, like it's an ongoing spiral. Like we have to be careful with our healing journeys too, because we can create a self-fulfilling prophecy if we're always like healing from something. We have to get to a point and accept ourselves as whole and complete. But when those things come up to transcend, to step past, we just have to show that love within ourselves and be like, and shine that love out. And that's what this whole journey on the planet is about, the basis of it.
I like that because I think you said two things right there. I think one thing that you said was you have to, listen, and when it comes up, you need to work towards it. But I think the other thing you said is at some point, Becky, you said that you have to feel whole and complete already, and you can't keep chasing or feeling that you're always broken or hurt or just, and I think that is there's a duality in this process. So, in your journey, like how did, unlocking or finally embracing that this was, so in one of your inner pains or inner childhood wounds, like how did you feel that? Like how did you work through, like actually letting it go?
So I have like a big one was my dad left when I was really little and I never knew him. And then when I found him, he actually passed away like a month later. So I never got to re-meet him again. So I held so much guilt and shame from that. And as a kid, you blame other people for your parents leaving, or you know what I mean? Like as
Yeah.
children, we want to blame ourselves for everything. And then as adults, we want to blame everybody else. It's a funny dichotomy when we get into it, right? When we're in that victim mode. And so that led into my relationships, such as you, self sabotage, fear of getting close to people because I believed they would leave. I felt relationships with the opposite sex or, the same sex were unsafe because that's what I knew as a child.
Yeah.
And so what I really had to do was turn within and go, okay, this all is my basis of my relationship with myself, my intimacy with myself, my self-love. because when we get to a point where our self-love and our self-care is, not in a self-absorbed way, but we know who we are in our heart, and we can open our heart and realize that our vulnerability is power, and nobody can hurt us unless we allow them to, and unless we take ourselves so seriously that, people offend us.
Yeah.
And one of the greatest quotes I ever heard is, "If you're easily offended, you're easily manipulated." And it's so true, because when things offend you, you're being manipulated by the outside. You're allowing something outside to control how you feel on the inside.
Wow. One, I'm sorry that, in the situation that happened to you, and I know, it was outside of your control. It was other situations, but, I think it's tough because when we're in that spot, like I can only imagine that it's easy to internalize and say that you're to blame or you're to fault, even though like your dad leaving was not your fault. But as like you said, as a child, we just you grasp to concepts to rationalize what's going on, and then you just continue on your life and not really realize what it was. And I think the fact that, you know, working through it was, like I think that's great, Becky. Like it's tough, right? I mean, I feel like for me, it was, it was multiple. I think it was I had a nanny who, female nanny who did inappropriate things to me at a very young age, and then I also had a very abusive father who took it to, the punishment, because we were able to do corporal punishment in Sri Lanka before we moved. My teachers could hit, and that type of stuff. And then what happens is, I felt like my village and, families hide those secrets and you can't talk about it, you can't internalize it. And some of it I felt this pain and shame. And so to me, I just like, and that's where, Rose, you kind of mentioned, struggling with some of these secrets. And I think for me, I didn't start talking about it till I was 19. So that's 15, 18, like years of holding some of those inner pains in. And I realized that the moment I talked about it, it was scary, it was painful, and it was, but I think a part of me, it just I didn't have to hold it in anymore. And then once you just realize that this happened, I didn't cause it, but it happened, and then I was able to slowly start realizing how I had all these weird behaviors. And, I think, Becky, one thing that you said was you were nervous about partners and you didn't feel trust, or that, they were gonna leave, and I kinda had that too. And I think one of the things that, your infographic, and I think what you had was, abandonment wounds, the guilt wounds, trust wounds, and neglect wounds, and we'll go more into that as well. But for me, a lot of mine were the neglect wounds. I just felt very neglected, and I felt like I isolated myself so much because being safe and alone, no one could hurt me.
Exactly, it becomes that blanket of safety when you're alone and you keep people on the outside. But, you said when we do that, when we keep people on the outside, we're actually missing out on the true essence of life, is to have these beautiful relationships with, not just like, spousal relationships, but having intimate relationships with family and friends, and feeling that trust and feeling that beauty. And I'm sorry that happened to you. And that speaks volumes, because there's so many people on this earth plane that those types of things have happened to, and it's such an unfortunate thing. And honestly, I've always looked at that, and it's like, what happened to that lady when she was a kid? Maybe that was her norm. Or
Yeah.
like your dad, that was probably his norm, and I'm not dismissing their
No,
behavior, but this is
you know,
where that generational trauma moves down the line.
yeah, and 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 that's true. You have to kind of realize that the person going through, who did this stuff, are going through their own journey. And I can either take their pain and carry it on and believe that it's mine, or I can give it back and say, "Hey, here's your baggage. Thank you. I carried it for a while. You deal with it, but I have my own stuff to deal with." And, and Rose, I think one of the things that you mentioned is about, overextend yourself. Yeah. So for me, I would exert myself because I was always running. And so one of the things, with the neglect wounds, it's, struggle to let things go, low self-worth, getting angry easily, struggles to say no, repressed emotions, fear of vulnerability, attracting normally attracts people who don't appreciate them or make them feel seen. So that was so for me, because of those type things, I would always just overexert myself because I was just trying to feel the validation, the love, and I was overexerting myself because I was just doing too much to get the
Yeah.
validation.
And that's that abandonment wound right there. That is that abandonment wound. And like what our bodies want to do is we're fearing this so subconsciously of people leaving us and neglecting us. We're actually chasing that energy out and attracting more of it in because our brains want to prove us right always.
Yeah,
Whether we're aware of what we're trying to be proved right, this is where like the manifestation comes in. It's like when you can release those subconscious beliefs and blocks in your brain and start telling yourself, I am worthy of love. I am I stand up for myself. You know, when we overexert, we're being codependent. And what that is we're, like you said, trying to fix somebody else's pain but we're actually abandoning ourselves,
yeah,
which is the key to that neglect abandonment wound. When you start abandoning who you are at a soul level and your own needs,
yeah.
that's a sign you need to like turn within and be like, hey, I need to love myself some more.
No, you're right, and I think doing this process, like the abandonment, feeling left out, fears of being left, like they hate to be alone, codependent, threatens to leave or attracts, emotionally unavailable people. And that's kind of how you'll see and feel the abandonment mood aspect. And I think for me, as I was trying to deal with like my neglect wounds, I realized that I was kind of also to your point, doing the abandonment. So I realized, in this journey, ultimately the guilt, the neglect, the trust, and like we jump from each one. It's not that you're just in one type of wound. I realized when you have this, it's like a snake bite. You got a couple different
Yeah.
like scars that you have to really just kind of work through. And I think and Becky, maybe you can kind of give some perspective. I was always either self-numbing or trying to just I was hyper vigilant, always trying to ruminate to figure out what the problem was. So how do you, recommend and because you work with people and everyone, Becky's information's in the link. So if you ever want to work with someone and work through like energy releases, Becky does that on the spiritual side and logical side. So, but anyways, like how, for people like the letting go aspect. I feel like everyone's so tight onto those ideas and it's hard to just release. So
So somatics are really powerful. Like we hold this not just in our subconscious mind and in our like in our conscious and subconscious mind. We actually hold these pains in our nervous system and our energy, our emotional and mental energy systems. We have all these layers of energy around us, and we hold that in us. And so what'll happen is we're so unaware. We're living in fight or flight. We're living in that parasympathetic nervous system,
yeah,
unaware. We're always on alert, and it's like you're a deer in the wild looking for danger. So when that danger comes up, you might even get a rush from it because we're so attuned to wanting those crappy relationships, to wanting to
yeah.
give ourselves all to somebody and then be hurt because it's like it's the norm to our nervous systems. So it's all about this calibration, coming back to a nothingness, coming back to like a balance of being calm. Most people who are hypervigilant and who live in any type of major abandonment mood don't know what calm is. We don't know, we've never lived in calm. And when calm comes in, we are so distressed. We need to cause drama.
I I cannot like I used to self-sabotage my happiness all the
Yeah.
time, 'cause especially the peace. When I felt like someone was healthy, I would
Yeah.
just, you know,
You're
it
probably like, "Oh, they're boring. We need to like
yeah,
shake this up a little bit. This is
like,
not normal."
is something wrong? And then I would go towards the avoidant attachment that I had to this, like, someone that I thought I liked, but it was the idea of. And I think for
Yeah.
me, that's where, you know, sometimes we tend to think of someone as an idea or a concept and not quite really like what the situation is. And I think when we have some of these inner blocks, which I do recommend that everyone also, see a therapist, see a counselor. Becky and I are
Yeah.
we've done our inner work. So this is not like we're just random people who are just talking about it. Like we've had things go on in our life, but we've done years and we've made this our life's mission. And I think the way that we met was we were on our own soul journey of like trying to find our soul village and healing and helping people because we didn't want anyone else to feel the way that we feel, and we just connected. And I think Rose, you mentioned something is the natural nuances and the phenomenon. I think these connections that we have as people, they have a lot of power. And I think, there's good relationships and there's bad relationships. But if we think everything's going to be a bad, we give power to the bad. So the more that we can give power to the good connections and the good bonds, we can start creating. And kind of like what Becky said is sometimes it's held within us and we hold it in our genes and our stuff. And that's where like epigenetics, that's where like
Yeah.
the concept of thought can change our DNA. And realistically, our DNA is part of our mitochondria. It's part of like our center within our bodies that tells the cell when it dies how to replicate. So every time your cell dies, it has a code that it's going to replicate with. So the more that we
All
can
starts in here.
and change the actual like, hey, come back a little bit better and going, and keep doing that cycle. And that's how truly how the epigenetics aspect of our cycle works. And if you, and I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent because like I feel like I just had my light bulb moment. But like as we kind of go through it, our body is constantly changing. They say your taste buds change in every 7 years. So if we're able to change our perspective and realize that whatever's going on, once I deal with it, once I shine a light on it, it's going to get better. That belief, that's when everything just starts snowballing.
It all starts with belief, and I love that tangent you went on because it's so true. Epigenetics are so powerful when we give so much belief to disease, sickness, hate, disdain, negative energies. It brings it starts programming our cells like that, and we pass that on to our children and future generations. So this is why it's so important to ignite these dormant strands of DNA within us with this light, with this belief that we can transcend anything that we've been through. With belief, the one of the light switches that really went on for me is I always believed all the garbage I went through in my life, well, it brought me to this place where I am now for a reason. Without all this wisdom, without all this pain I went through, I wouldn't have the capacity to teach and lead people the way I do, as you as well. We wouldn't have the knowledge base that we have. The best teacher is personal experience. Unfortunately, sometimes that personal experience really sucks and it's painful. One of the a great quote that I've read is that you're not responsible for the things that have happened to you as a child, but you are 150% responsible to transcend that and heal those parts of yourself to pass a better version of yourself on to those around you.
Yeah, no, I think that's very powerful. Um, that we're what happened isn't our responsibility, but the future and our actions are. And uh, it's I think, and maybe, this is where we can kind of expand a little bit more is I think for me, and this is, and now I'm going to talk about more the guilt wound where, I always felt, I had to say sorry or like it was my mistake. And, I didn't like to ask for things. And sometimes people would manipulate me because I was always just trying to do good for the validation. And realistically I was always afraid to kind of set my boundaries. But one thing I started doing in this whole process was finally holding myself accountable and holding myself with some boundaries. And because realistically, Becky, to your point, I never felt um like I connected. Like logically, I understood people, but emotionally, I've always had weird blocks. And so, to your point, if this pain and this suffering happened, I don't think I would have the compassion and the empathy to really care for the common man because I think I just there's other aspects of my life where I was an outlier, but then there's other parts where this pain just humbled me to the point where I felt broken. And I think, how do people, and based on your wisdom and your journey, how would people work on actually asking for help? Or, because, Rose mentioned something about secrets. And I think for us, we carried secrets and we talked about that stuff. So, how do you talk to people and how do you let go? And when it's so unnatural.
So
And
secrets is the shame wound and the guilt wound right there. Those are like the big sign points. How do you ask for help? Well, first of all, you have to realize that you need help. Realizing there's something going on within you is the first step. And then realizing you don't want to be a victim of what's going on within you. And I saw Rose post something about post traumatic stress. Had super complex PTSD. I couldn't even function. Like I had such high functioning anxiety, social anxiety. I still have moments where I do
yeah,
that I would run and I would go on binges. Like I would drink,
eat,
my brain was so shut down. I got to the point where I'd only have like 5 or 6 drinks and I would black out because my mind couldn't handle all the stress
all
within
this.
it, and I was like, "I gotta change this.
Yeah,
Like, this is not serving me. I'm gonna be dead in a year if I keep doing this." And it's like I was thinking of my kids, and I'm like, "I can't do this. Like, how am I teaching them how to cope with things if I'm running away from myself?" It's
yeah,
about looking at yourself in the mirror first and taking a good hard look and seeing and saying, "I'm worth it." And then setting the intention. I'm all about intention because when we're ready, when the student is ready, the master, the teacher will appear. Set the intention, search for the right teacher to work with you. And then, either use a tool like Google, believe Facebook ads that come up because everything's an algorithm for us. And I've learned this. There's no such thing as coincidence. It's all synchronistic. And just like do some research for yourself. What's going to work for you? Maybe regular therapy has never worked for you because you've never found a therapist that doesn't work outside the books that they've read. Perhaps that was my thing because I would like analyze the therapist because I've studied psychology most of my adult life and I'm like, you don't even know what you're talking about, or they haven't even been through stuff in their life and they're trying to like, no ill on them. They're doing their job, but we have to like resonate with the people we're working with.
yeah.
Like we have to be on an energetic level where the person we're working with is not above, but it's like we're being calibrated up to their energy. So if you're working with somebody who's maybe their knowledge and whatever's down here, you're not going to learn anything. It's about leveling each other up in this, this knowledge of life, this awareness, and opening up your consciousness to be like, I am worthy. I am ready to release this. And just setting these intentions, like, our inner voice is so powerful. When you're noticing negative self-talk going on in your head, nip it in the bud. Being aware of those triggers that are going on, maybe journal when triggers come up and ask yourself why. Where does this come from? Your subconscious, or if you believe in guides, whatever you believe in, your higher power, your soul is going to lead you to the root cause of that. And it's going to keep showing up in your existence until you transcend it.
I love that. And I'm going to try to summarize what I heard in the most concise way because I think that was super powerful. I think one thing that the question I asked was how should someone embrace or deal with some inner blocks when they have a tough time with it. And I think one thing you said was, or what you said was, embrace that a part of you is broken or something is wrong and you need to fix it. And you want to then embrace the fact that what you said earlier was, once you realize it, then you start working on it. But then um, you make intentions and you slowly start building intentions. You find people and then you work on letting go and leveling up. And I think that's very powerful. And I think that aspect of knowing that something is wrong and I think I'll expand a little bit more on that because for me I was a little delulu, or at least it's, like I didn't understand because this was the norm. When you have chronic stress or you have this stuff, and I had complex PTSD too, and I read this book, and I realized that I did my ACE score, and I was like a 7, and I realized I'm living a cursed life. I'm gonna have high I already had high blood pressure. I was infertile at this point. Like I had all these health issues. It was holding in that stress and that anxiety and that fear. And I was doing the same thing, Becky.
Yeah.
You said was, you had this pain, you had all this stuff, and you were almost like reliving it, but you were also trying to hide away from it. And I get that because I was doing the same thing with in my own ways. And I think it helped me process it, but also it was so detrimental for me. And that's when I was like, man, you're killing my like like, you know, and then I had to figure out why. And, in that journey of figuring out that something was wrong, or something happened, I went on more of a spiritual journey. And, this is and what I love about Buddhism, it's more about like teachings and logic. And, what Buddha talked about, enlightenment and all that stuff. The first rule of like Buddhism is like to be a human is to suffer. And I was like, what does that mean? It's essentially we're attached to a concept or a craving, and what we're trying to do is, we're a chemistry, so every day it's not Groundhog's Day. You can't recreate the past every single day. You don't have all the things, but we're either craving or desiring, and we're stuck to something, and we keep trying to create chemistry or the same magic experience without all the ingredients. And we're so angry that we don't have the ingredients. And I think for me, that's how I was able to realize that I'm attached to something, and that's why I'm suffering. And now I have desires that aren't being fulfilled because of this attachment to some sort of concept or pain. And that's where this hidden pain, this whole journey for me was really important. I needed to figure out like where my pain was. And that's kind of what you were saying.
Well, it is. It's like finding the root because we store pain in our nervous systems and it may be inherited pain. Like it may be inherited trauma from our mothers because as soon as we're conceived and we're in our mother's womb, we are taking on the energies that they're going through. And I know this for a fact because my daughter, when I was pregnant with her, I was in her dad and I had a very tumultuous relationship. It was very physically and emotionally abusive. And when she was born, she was such a jumpy child. Like her nervous system was wound so tight from me and
Hmm.
I was like, "Oh my gosh, like I gotta fix this. Like this is not good." And there's many years of not good, but now it's like finally she's almost 16. It's like she's very aware and she's worked through it. We've released a lot of the trauma. Um, we just want to be aware like there's so many wounds like core wounds and core pain, and when you talk about like to be human is to suffer, it's like we're put on this earth and we feel like we need to be martyrs and we need to like prove a point. And when we release that attachment to that and realize we're here to have fun and be joyful and to serve each other, that is what it is to be human, to be unconditionally loving and understand. And I know I don't know any human who can do that 100% of the time, but to pull yourself into that and be, like, aware. I just wanted to list out the 5 main abandonment wounds for people to understand. So when you feel any of these types of things come up, realize that this is a lower part of you coming up to be transcended, to understand that you need to see past this. So, number 1 is rejection. I know I've suffered with the fear of rejection so much I'd push everybody away. That's that bubble there, right? Like, don't come in. I'm going to hurt you before you hurt me kind of thing. The second one is abandonment, which I'm sure everybody in their life has had some sort of abandonment. The third is humiliation. Everybody, it's a fear. The fourth is betrayal. And then the fifth is the injustice wound. Those people who feel they need to go march and like protest and save those lesser than. When we realize that we put that energy out, it actually is creating more discordant energy than just, sending out that love energy.
Wow.
We can really come back to ourselves because there's no one but self to change ever. That's what I have to remind myself when I'm frustrated or I'm mad at somebody else. I'm like, no, they're showing up for me this way because I have a belief inside me that's creating that dichotomy between the two of us.
Yeah, I think that's wow. You're right. It stems back to our inner work and doing it ourselves. And you know, so how I guess I want to kind of process that a little bit more too, because those five are so true, and I've never really quite heard it that way. It kind of had my aha moment. I was like, man, I do have probably one more that I never quite worked through. Um, so can you say that one more time? Because I think it'd be really important for people to hear that. What are the five?
List the wounds out, the 5 core wounds. So and there's like facets of each, but the 5 core wounds are number 1's rejection,
Reject.
number 2 is abandonment, number 3 is humiliation, number 4 is betrayal, and number 5 is injustice. So
Got
and
it.
there's like different little bits of this. So like with the wound of rejection, your mask is to withdraw,
Hmm.
you know. There's the withdrawal. With the wound of abandonment, the mask is the dependent, so the codependent. You're
Mm.
like holding on to people, and it's like you're fearing loneliness. With the wound of humiliation, you're a masochist, so you're emotional and mental, and you're like so masochistic within yourself and others, and so your fear is losing your freedom.
Mm. Damn, I feel like that's me right now. I'm so afraid of being free, like of losing my freedom now that I'm finally free now. So interesting. All right.
And then I'll
Go ahead.
just list the last two. So
Yeah.
betrayal, the fear is separation and denial, and your mask is the controller. So anybody who feels they need to control, it's like that betrayal wound. You don't want you don't trust people. It's like that fear of not trusting others, when really when we trust ourselves, others in our life will show up as trustworthy. And then the wound of injustice, this was, I was very cold, so it's like you're rigid and you're cold and you're so stuck in your ways, but you feel the need to like save other people too.
I like that. Wow. That was I hope everyone else on the watching, like, that was very powerful. I feel like that was an awakening for me because I think, that's another way of seeing and feeling your emotions. And I think when you don't understand why you're reacting, and that's where, I think in 2 weeks we're gonna have one more where we're gonna really talk about maybe responding instead of reacting to outside stimuli, and realizing you have a little bit of power, and kind of it's more kind of regaining that power because you know I was just like you, Becky. Sometimes those stimuli happen, I would go into like my guards up. I just don't, it's hard for me to let people into like my inner onion now. Like, and I trust people, but ultimately I trust them still with like a little bit of distance. Like, and I think um realizing that I have more power was really important. And I think that's where, that not responding, I'm sorry, responding, but not reacting to some of that stimuli. I mean, that has been probably one of my still struggles, and that's something I'm working on now. So, for people who are still dealing with the fact that, might have an inner wound that they didn't realize, like what are, so like, and I can give some examples, but what's an example that for you, you're just like, I guess besides the self destruction and some of the stuff we talked about, like, but what's another way that you felt like you were just running away from some of the inner wounds and not dealing with it when before we healed?
Even like, things like binge watching TV or having to be busy all the time. That's one of the biggest ones, like needing constant busyness and sound so your mind can't be still. That's a huge thing that's a huge red flag when you can't be still with yourself or be alone. And, I had this fear of being alone. I needed to be with people all the time, and I'm, like, actually quite an introvert, so I was like, "This is so weird to me. Like,
Mm.
why do I need people in my space?" Where now I'm, like, so happy, feeling bored. Boredom is a choice. Like, when you feel bored, it's because your mind needs to be busy, which is a red flag where it's like, "I need to look within. Why am I feeling bored?" Just things like that, pushing my family away, you know, I'd cut people off and not talk to them, and it was like, I don't know if it was like a more of an attention seeking thing where they chase me or if it was because I didn't want them, but it was realizing that and being like, okay, I need to be a little more kind and compassionate with myself and pass that on to others.
uh, thank you for sharing first and foremost. I think it's tough because I have experienced in a very similar but opposite way because we're a good yin to a yang, but because we both get it. And but I think for everyone watching, it's realizing how we're masking and we're not dealing with some of that. And I did that too, like I would always have to have the TV on. And even though I wanted to be alone, I always had a movie always replaying. And that rumination, I had to always just stay busy because it was when it was quiet, that's when the anxiety came in. That's when the panic, and I had to realize that I was just, and I think when you just don't know what safety is, and sometimes
Yeah.
like that safety, I realized I couldn't create it on the outside without knowing that it was possible on the inside. And I think that's where the belief, and it took me a long time because to your point, I was always running away. Like I was always running away from my feelings. And but I don't think your situation is uncommon. I don't think my situation's uncommon, but I think everyone else in society, we might all be doing, just don't know. And I think once you're able to put a voice, or not a voice, but you're able to put a reason to something, it's so much easier to just let it go. Even though you don't have to own the label, and we talked about that. I think we talked about like not labeling, and because sometimes I can still be a little judgy, because I use a label to because it's the easier way to lump someone in, but ultimately everyone's different. Everyone has a unique thing, but we have a commonality, and I think that's the human connection you talked about. And I think I had a tough time even listening to people because I was always anticipating the right reaction. And so, one thing I'm great at now is listening to a lot of information and giving it back because I'm present. If I wasn't present half the time, I'm listening and ruminating and not listening to the other person. And I think the hard part is when you're so used to that fight or flight, which you mentioned earlier, unprogramming that automatic nervous system, the cognitive triangle, it's hard because the safety used to cause me the fucking panic, because
Yeah.
it was too quiet. It was like something's wrong, and I needed to learn how to break that habit. So I
Yeah, it's such an irony, like, because our nervous system, when it's always like this, when there's calm, it, like, sends off all these, like, warning bells. It's like, "You need chaos in your life again," and then it takes you down that spiral still. It's that is huge when you're, like, trying to transcend, like, this journey and be calm. This is why meditation is so powerful because you teach your nervous system and your mind to be quiet.
yeah, I think it's tough, and and I'm going to talk about Monica. Monica, thank you for adding in some new commentary and really joining in. We really appreciate you, and and you can go back and see some of the other lives, or some of the comments that you missed. But one thing that you mentioned is maintenance and self care, and it being selfish, and it not feeling selfish. And can I tell you, until probably about a year ago, I felt so much guilt for asking for my own fucking boundaries to say, "Hey, listen, I need," and if I needed an hour, I'd be like, "I just need 5 minutes," and then I would go take 10 or 15 minutes. The last 10 or 15 minutes was just me being angry, be like, "I'm gonna fucking take my 10 minutes for myself," when I just asked for probably 20 minutes to begin with. But that's where not feeling you know having that guilt and the shame to even
Yeah.
prioritize. I felt that it was selfish of me to prioritize my own needs, but ultimately I was so angry and so frustrated. I was not a good human being to the people that mattered most. I was to like Becky, I was high functioning. I was able to just achieve greatness with my work and these other things and just hide it in where no one understands. But deep down, I'm just having a fucking panic attack. and I'm
Yeah.
able to get through it. And all of that was because I was selfish by doing for others, and I wasn't taking care of myself. And I need
Right.
to be more selfless and realize that it's not selfish to take care of my needs. I'm not good for everyone else if I am just spiraling. And that's
And I love what you said there because that's that martyrism that we're raised in society to be. And then we get bitter and mad at everybody, but we teach people how to treat us ultimately. It's like even, in my work, it's like we have to train people how to treat us by the way we show up for ourselves. Like
yeah.
even spouses, children, if you're letting people walk all over you, they're going to expect that. And then when you pull back and you're like angry that they're not allowing you time, well, you never taught them that you need time. So now they're so used to that, you know?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because like I know my mom and that generation that they were taught to give everything, especially the
Well,
moms.
and that's true, but that's I would say that's probably the better moms, and then there's gonna be the other moms, who didn't have their needs met, and they've become the ones who are using their daughters or someone else as a validation to them. They're like the kids
Yeah.
become the caregivers, and that's where, to your point, I think that's where some of the sources of pain and the generational trauma comes in because people don't get to deal with it, And so, how did you had a loving and caring mom who probably, unfortunately, when dad moved or did his thing, your mom had to be superwoman. She was probably mom, dad, and and she did everything she could to take care of you. But the hard
Yeah.
part is, like we get so accustomed, and my mom was the same. She worked two full-time jobs. She was the primary breadwinner, even though they were still together. Like, she was the workhorse, and she was always gone. And so that loving, nurturing side that I needed, I didn't always have because she was always at work. And so, how were you able to slowly let go and change some of those habits?
So, I was really bitter at my mom for many years because she was there, but she wasn't present. Like, she had so much going on, and she'd serve us and do everything, but it was almost codependent where she'd, like, do my homework for me because I was such a rebellious kid, and she'd be like, "Oh my gosh, you need to do it," and I love my mom so much now, but even a few years ago, I had to stop talking to her, and it wasn't for like, I was mad at her, it was because I needed to heal those parts of me to show up as a great human. And like my stepdad came into my life when I was like 3.5. And I was so bitter because she created this she wouldn't let him discipline us because she was so afraid. So it created this distance between his relationship and ours. So I grew up bitter because I thought he didn't want anything to do with me. And this is the thing as children, you grow up feeling things around you, which I made up this stuff in my head. And it's interesting because my sister is his kid and my mom's kid together, and I have a brother that's my full brother.
Mm,
And my sister, I talked to her a few years ago, and I'm like, I've always called my stepdad dad because he's been the primary father in my life.
yeah.
And she's like, he's the same way with me. He's just that old school type. Like he's not super connected. And that like lights went off in my head. I'm like, why am I being bitter? And it was that wound. I
Yeah.
hated men so much and I didn't realize it. So I'd attracted men that hated me or would treat me poorly because
Mhm.
I had this fear of connecting to a man and being in my feminine. I felt like I always had to be in my masculine and take care of everything. And I was afraid to let somebody else take care of things. And, I let go. And my relationship with my mom and my stepdad is so amazing now
Yeah.
because I see them for who they are. And because I think now that I have kids and I realize the mistakes that I have made and we do the best we can with what we have at the time. And we're all human and we have to see our parents as humans. We have to see those around us as humans. And it's, like I said, no one but self to change. I had to shift the way I perceived the relationships around me instead of being the victim of my parents, the
Yeah.
victim of my upbringing, the victim of, my crappy relationships. Oh, poor me. That's how I used to get energy off people. I'd be sad. I'd look for sympathy. And then I had somebody tell me one day, Becky, there's a huge difference between sympathy and empathy. You need to look that up. And I looked it up, and sympathy is an energy grab where you want energy or you're giving energy to somebody. Where empathy is this understanding that there's beauty in everything and we can put ourselves with the person but not give them the energy that they're trying to take from those around us. We don't want to be energy vampires or energy takers. We want this balance. We
Yeah.
truly want to take energy from source, from God, from universe, not from people around us.
Thank you for sure. I mean, I think the the empathy and sympathy aspect of realizing the energy exchange, and also just kind of how you explained how you dealt with some of that. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it, it's very common, but people don't realize that sometimes the behaviors and the extents that we all go to, and one, I'm sorry that there was a period of your life where you attracted those people, and I know you've learned the lessons and you've broken the cycle, and you had to touch the fire probably 1,000 times for you to learn your lesson, but it, like, because I was kind of the same way, like no one could tell me no. I was very disobedient, and I had I questioned authority, and I still do with teachers, but ultimately, or I used to. But I think it's very important that you're able to turn in all of that. And Becky, like, you didn't just let it consume you. You switched your light from dark to light. Like, you changed your entire aura. And I think that's powerful because it shows people that no matter where life takes me, I can change my perspective. And you did that, and so I have one more thing I want to say, but before I do, thank you for sharing that, because I think it's powerful.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for all you've shared. You know, when we start showing up for ourselves, others will start showing up for us too.
Yeah, no, 100%. And Monica sees it, and so does Rose.
Thanks, Monica. I love you, Monica. I know Monica. She's so awesome.
Oh, great. Yeah, so it's nice to see, like, the feedback, because I think it's important because, you know, Monica, I've seen situations of very narcissistic and, those very extreme toxic, borderline personality, those type true disordered people. And I've seen it in my family line, which I'm not gonna, really get to. But the hard part is, when that's what we grew up with, we learn that sometimes if we just take care of all other people over ourselves, what happens is we're just safe. So I'm just going to take care of everyone, because once I do, then these toxic people aren't going to come take my energy anymore. And I realized that when I got older, I had power over it, and I realized how many people, because for me, I had a lot of bad relationships, and I used to give my power away, and I used to attract. I like being the dependent of the codependent. I liked someone, depending on me, but the people that used to come in, I didn't realize weren't. I used to imagine that they were something that they weren't, where I saw the potential in them, and they sometimes the devil, like, once the devil kind of gets in, and you don't know someone's pain, like, as someone who's sensitive and who dealt with that toxic and that type of environment, we start to, like, absorb that, and we need to fix it and heal it and start that other horrible cycle of recreating our childhood with our partners. And I think for me, that's one of the journeys that I don't really talk too much about, because I talk more about mental health and and logic. But for me, my relationship bonds, and because of those type power dynamics, because these are parents and authority figures. Why would we as children think they're gonna hurt us? Like, that's just that's just not what the books, and that's not how society teaches us. So it's kind of like, why the fuck am I dealing with this when that's not how life is? So you just think that, oh, like that person is a much greater person. I'm only going to see the good, and you don't, you don't see it. And I think it's tough when you have it from both sides and you just don't know that level of safety. I had a nice village, even though I didn't have that in Sri Lanka. I had tons of cousins, aunts, and uncles that were able to rationalize. I was able to talk through and normalize my experience. But for situations like you, Monica, and some ex people that I've dated, and and now people I talk to that have those type patterns, I was like, hey, listen, let's just be friends. I'll help you. I'm here for you, but I can't give you my romantic love because I'm just going to become too attached to you, and it's just unhealthy for me, and I have to set those boundaries. But
Yeah.
ultimately, one thing that I tell those type bonds once I see those people coming into my life, because once you know it, you're gonna keep attracting the same cycles. Even though Becky and I are able to break the pattern and we see the people that like come to us that used to, like they still are gonna keep coming. But at least I know I can set my boundaries and walk away and say, hey, listen, please take that somewhere else. Or, or I have to like really, stand up for myself and protect my family. And once you start setting your boundaries and you start getting firm, most bullies and most really like mean people are gonna go away. So that's something is I had to learn is I can be safe, I can build a village, and also I had ownership of setting my own boundaries. And that's how those three things, and we talked about the stress cycle. I had this cognitive triangle of the outside person, and sometimes it was that narcissistic or that toxic person. My source of stress would come in. I would go through this loop between my midbrain, my executive brain, and my lower brain, and the cognitive triangle would work, and I would react. And that's where I had to realize is I'm safe. Fuck this person. They don't have power. Like I push that away. And then I have to figure out all of the different filters within myself that I have to like clean up. So that way, because it might not be from this one or this one or this one. Sometimes all three might fire, one might fire, but ultimately there was a pattern. And I need to realize that I had some control and where I could control it. And that was like my aha moment. And I hope that helps you on your journey, because I think for me, I can empathize and sympathize because I've seen it and I felt it. And I think taking your power back from those type energy is probably going to be the best thing for you as you move forward, because it's going to start building the confidence and the boundaries, and you have space to flourish. It's not like you're in this pot where you're just like going through the weeds and all that stuff. You're able to grow.
That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I love understanding people's thinking patterns and how they work through it, because you never know how many lives you'll touch by explaining the way you work through things. It's going to set off a light bulb in somebody's head, and just amazing. And I love what you said, because it's ultimately about bringing your power back within, not putting it outside, and understanding your own energy. When we can quiet and understand, clear our own energy and understand what it feels like, so when other energies come in, we can remove them with our mind, instead of having you get to a point where you can actually remove it with your mind, like
Yeah.
working with intention rather than having to say anything on the outside. It's about being proactive, not reactive, like what we're going to talk about in a couple weeks. It's all about that. It's understanding, it's the maintenance, it's this journey. We Even though we are in this place where we are now, there's still maintenance involved. There's still calibration involved in our energies and our mindset. Like I catch myself all the time saying negative things in my head or thinking negative things about people.
Same, same. And so that's, I think, one thing is I really want to, like make sure we leave everyone with is, though people talk about being healed, like I'm gonna wait healed until I date you. And I was like, one, I'm healing. I
Yeah.
always have this scar. My heart has just overgrown the scar tissue. and I can love more. I've done my work, but there are going to be times that I am not perfect. And when this stuff is ingrained deep within us, we have to just let it, like just know that it's going to be okay. And I think, yeah, I don't know. We'll get there, and I think we have a lot of good content because I think next week's going to be, it's more about the reaction. Even though we're going to be talking about it, I feel like we do a good job of like talking about the why and the foundations, and then we're really kind of talk about the power probably in the next one, probably close to Christmas, because I think what give it will give us an opportunity to think through it and also share our experience, but also ultimately you'll have a good library. First is going to be, why is my intuition blocked? Like,
Yeah.
that pain coming from? Then it's going to be like, hey, I'm afraid of something. I'm going to work towards that and my self sabotaging. And that's where you kind of learn the control. Then it's like, this one's where the fear and where the blocks might be. Next is going to be about, like working through the control when you are in that trigger activated moment, because that's going to happen. To Becky's point, I still go, I'm never going to be healed, but I'm always going to be healing because that's living. So it's not, it's either you're living or you're dying. I look at it like that. You'll never be
Yep.
healed because either I'm born or I'm dead. That's healed. I'm going to be living. And I want people to realize is, let's live and let's not kill ourselves and let's live for a better future. And
I
we
love that.
all live a future, and then the healing will just commence.
Well, you get to the point, I love that, like, so beautiful, and it's because, like I said, we do create a self-fulfilling prophecy if we're always needing something to heal from. I started saying, "I am that I am," and you know what, if you something's gone off in your life where it's like, "Oh my gosh, not good energy," you've gotten in a fight, make amends. First of all, make amends with yourself, forgive yourself, and then make amends with the person that you feel you may have hurt and move forward. Because
Yeah,
the only time we create is right now. The past doesn't create us unless we allow it. And if we let the past create us, we're going to create more of that in the future. We want to create a new future. So you start right now and create it and say, I am that I am. And know that you are a divine being of light and you can create anything you want in your life. It all starts now.
I love it. I love it. I am what I am, and I'm a divine light, and I am meant to be on this earth. So thank you, Becky, and I will definitely make sure I'm saying it. As I said it, my voice got a little raspy, so I think it was a good.
Throat chakra. Throat
Yeah,
chakra.
I finally believed it, saying it right now. But is there anything else that you want to share, or any wisdoms, or anything else before we kind of start wrapping up this live?
No, I don't think so. I think we've touched so much and there's so much energy and like emotion and information in these seminars. So anybody who's watching now or the replays, go back and listen to the other ones because there's so much powerful information. You never know what you're gonna learn from listening to people's perspectives. That's why it's beautiful. It's beautiful hearing people's perspectives. I just wanted to put it out there that I do have a healing circle coming up in a week and I think it's 10 days. So you can look in my link. So if anybody needs some chakra balancing or energy healing, like I do these to create energetic sovereignty. I train people to heal themselves. That's my mission here. I always say to my clients, I don't want to see you for 4 years. I want to see you for a few sessions and
Yeah,
release you to the wild. And you can do this yourself. It's about creating awareness. So if you want to come join us, it's over Zoom. I love that medium because we can work with people all over the world.
I love that. And once we're done, y'all, if you want, I can put that link to Becky's, for the time until it's happened right here on the link, so that way anyone watching can go right to Becky and be part of her awakening, which I did about a week ago, on a separate one, and that was very helpful for me because I had just lost, honestly, a friend, and like an hour before our awaken, the event I went to, I'm Buddhist. I've done deep meditation my whole life, but it was such a good process to do it collectively. And Becky has such a great soothing voice, so I definitely recommend everyone to attend her events because it's very therapeutic and healing.
Thank you. It's in my link tree, so I think that's just the link I updated all the time. So same link. If you're watching this in a year from now, you can click that link and see any upcoming group events. They're always in there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was the best engagement we had, and I know this is just going to continue to grow. And we appreciate all of you because we're a collective of human beings. We're one soul with different perspectives, different beliefs, and we need each other. Even though we don't, we do.
Yeah, and I wanna say if you're watching this, you're on the path to becoming the best version of yourself because I truly believe that. As I raise up, those around me raise up, and I see it. So if you're watching this, you're on the path to self-discovery and an amazing life ahead.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Thank you, Becky. Have a
Bye. Love you.
oh, I was trying to move my computer and I realized it's my phone.